Hi, this is Frank Schaefer. I was raised in the religious right. I wrote a memoir about my journey out of the religious right called Crazy for God, which kind of blew the whistle on the radical direction the religious right had taken when it actually took over the Republican Party and gave the Republican Party a series of culture war litmus tests that changed the Republican Party from a political party into a religious radical group of white Christian nationalists bent on overthrowing democracy in America. I had been warning for years, almost 30 years actually, that this was going to happen. But until the election of Donald Trump, my warnings were essentially ignored. After January 6th and the insurrection and the attempt to overthrow our democracy, all of a sudden people began to ask me questions and the media called. And I found myself talking a lot about what had happened. Usually when I make these commentaries, I don't write them down or read them. They are, to use the old lingo of my evangelical background, simply from the heart. But today I have some facts that I want to share with you about the appointment of Johnson as Speaker of the House that I am going to read here because I'm quoting him and other people, and I want it to be accurate. And I would headline this simply: Johnson, Speaker of the House, is the religious right's most extreme and deadly victory ever. Johnson has deep ties to two evangelical organizations designated by the Southern Poverty Law Center as hate groups. Johnson is a frequent radio host for Tony Perkins' hardcore Christo-fascist Family Research Council. Johnson founded a legal firm called Freedom Guard to give a free representation to all government officials who violate their oaths of office by refusing to give marriage licenses to same-sex couples. Johnson was the key legal architect of the Republicans' effort to not certify the victory of Joe Biden on January 6, 2021. Johnson's efforts to undermine the legal election results disproportionately targeted Black and brown people. Johnson was the key player inspiring and encouraging Trump's deadly Christian nationalist violent coup attempt. During Johnson's first run for Congress in 2016, Johnson told the Baptist Message magazine, quote, "Some people are called to pastoral ministry and others to music ministry. I was called to legal ministry." And then he added, "I've been out on the front lines of the culture war." As a Louisiana state rep, Johnson championed the anti-LGBTQ legislation that local business leaders then deemed, and I quote, "toxic, poisonous, and radioactive." Johnson is working for a national abortion ban, co-sponsoring legislation to declare that, quote, "the right to life guaranteed by the Constitution is vested in the moment of fertilization," end quote. This targets not only all abortions for everyone all the time, but also almost all methods of contraceptive. When radical right-wing leader Representative Stefanik nominated Johnson for Speaker, she compared the House of Representatives picking Johnson to God picking King David. Taking the gavel for the first time that night, Johnson said, and I quote, "The Bible is very clear that God is the one who raises up those in authority. He raised up each of you, all of us, and I believe that God has ordained and allowed each one of us to be brought here." In other words, Johnson sees himself as the instrument of God, called to overturn our democracy and replace it with God-appointed theocrats such as himself. In his view, it is not what the American people decide that matters in elections, but what he and those like him interpret as God's will. Johnson's aim is not only to deny one particular election he didn't like and work around democracy, but Johnson's political and religious view endorses the idea that we must destroy democracy entirely and replace our American democracy with a full-blown, reconstructed theocracy. If Johnson's ideal is realized, we will find ourselves no longer living in the United States of America as we understand it, but in a white Christian nationalist version of Iran. This is not fiction. This is happening right now as you listen to these words. This is not some far-flung, radical, fringe theological idea. This is the heart of our U.S. Congress with its Republican majority. We have one more election in 2024 to roll back the theocracy movement, because that's what it is, and stand up for our democracy. And then that's it. My name is Frank Schaeffer.